for me, doing it for yourself is doing what you want, and it's hard to really put that into like you're trying to get a sound bite, and there's always nuance to it, and it's figuring out what you really want and then how to get there, and understand that how to get there will not be the same as what actually happens, because there's always going to be landmines of some sort.
That is Jono Hooper this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey there, how you doing? How's it going? The last time that we spoke, I believe I said that it was kind of starting to feel like fall. However, that is not really the case anymore. It was pretty warm today, and it's supposed to be pretty warm tomorrow as well. So, listen, I'm not complaining. I love the weather. It's been very, very nice. I do love the sunshine. But as some of you may know, last year I really got into skiing, and so I'm looking forward to that part of the season as well. It's nice to mix it up every once in a while, and it's something that I definitely recommend as triathletes who are doing so much swim, bike, run all the time through those spring, summer, and fall months. It's definitely worth checking it out to just to mix things up a bit. So that's what's going on for me and the weather. And as for the podcast this week, which is, I'm sure, why you are here, I have a guest whose name is Jono. And Jono is from Australia, and he came to the States to pursue his education. And there were many difficulties when it came to pursuing this dream of coming to the United States in order to pursue his higher education. And so he really had to work through a lot of different obstacles to get over here, to find the right school, to get settled in, and really even just to get here in one particular situation. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this podcast with you from Jono about getting over here to pursue his dream and get his higher education and really start a career and something that he really wanted to do. So that's what we are about here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. And we are about staying the path and not giving in to the resistance and anything that could potentially come that way. Ironically, that being said, you'll notice that things kind of cut off pretty quick here at the end. Unfortunately, I got a call, and Jono also got a call that kind of all led to having to wrap up the podcast pretty quickly. So I do usually like to give everybody a chance to mention some things and areas where they can get connected. But just given the circumstances, we had to wrap things up pretty quick. So it may seem a little bit awkward. That is definitely what the case is. So just a heads up. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Jono.
There's the story of just how we met, which is hilarious in itself.
Yeah.
Which is so the videographer for the entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk, D-Rock, just put on Instagram, just comment like what your name is, where you are, and something that you need. And I believe you commented.
I commented and said, "Yeah, I was looking for podcast guests," and you sent me a message, and then I started looking through your profile to see what you were up to, and I was like, "Wait a minute, he's at Goldie, like,
and that's
it's like right across the street." You know?
And I actually just walked here from Goldie, so that's like a 10-minute walk tops.
Yeah,
a little bit of a hill, but
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Now you're the only one that I've met like locally through that. I mean, so we'll see what happens, but it's pretty crazy in and of itself that
absolutely
we got some guy in New York who's coordinating meetups, and I'm sure like you and I aren't the only ones who got a chance to experience that.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's other people that have connected on his page who are close to one
just close enough
another.
that they could. Or
Yeah.
and another one I talked to from the comment section. He's in Chicago, and we chatted a little bit, but that's kind of died off because there's very little that we can do right now because we're so far apart. But I will be going through Chicago again at some point. So
Mhm.
as soon as that happens, he's one of the first people I'm going to contact. Like, I'm coming through, so we're going to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you started like we'll start your story kind of around high school. Um and I'm sure people can obviously tell that although they can't see you, we had a little technical difficulties with the camera. Um you were just joking, you look like every other white guy, but you sound a little bit different than every other white guy. So you're not from the States.
Not even close.
So yeah, let's get into kind of where you were in high school and what you were doing
Yeah.
then.
So I actually looked it up one time, and if you do like a map of like what's on the opposite end of the Earth to where you are right now, where I'm from is about as close as you can get. That's not over the ocean. So was born in Sydney, Australia, but grew up like high school years in Brisbane. So sunny city year round, and yeah, went to high school and was graduating 2014. And about midway through the year, it's had pretty much the same plan as everyone else in my year, which was like go to schoolies, which is like the senior week after school
Mm-hmm.
and get drunk, and then start uni or college in January, February the next year. And in Australia, they graduate high school in November, so that the academic year runs with the calendar. So it's like you have 2 months, and then you're right into it, and like go to uni, get a part-time job somewhere, and get drunk on the weekends. So that was the idea, and that was it's like okay, this is the path. And then through happenstance, went to a career fair at the school and did the lap, talked to all the unis, and then met a man named Chris Bates, who was running a company that essentially they work as a sports agent for high school athletes in Australia to get them a scholarship.
And you were an athlete in high school.
Yeah.
You were running in high school.
I was running in high school. I was running before that, so always in some way athletic, doing Australian football, soccer for a little bit, tennis, and running was the only one that I really stuck with. So I was doing that from 5 or 6, and then just kept with it, and that kept me in shape, thankfully. And yeah, so I started talking to him at the career fair, and he was like, "So what sport do you play?" I said, "Oh, cross country." He said, "Okay, we can work with that. So what are your times?" I told him, "It's like we can work with that." And just kept that conversation going, and eventually he's over at my house with the parents, and he said, "Yeah, this we can make this work absolutely, and we can get you over to a college in America on a sports scholarship, and you get to go to university in America, get to see the country, get to really experience it, rather than just like doing like a week holiday where you're just doing all the touristy stuff and not doing like a gap year where you're a year behind in your education, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's still getting two things done at once in that sense."
And I mean, especially nowadays, like I, I'm just thinking back now that you said that, and I think out of all of the people that I was close with that went through college after high school, I got maybe one or two who did it in 4 years. So
Yeah.
it's like even if you take a gap year and then you come back and you finish it in four, like you're still right back where everybody else was.
Yeah.
It's really not a big deal nowadays.
Not at all. Like I got classmates like who's 28, 32, 40, and they're still just going through it. And it really doesn't matter. Like yeah, they've also got a lot more of experience. Like the 28-year-old, she's been a mechanic, a bartender, she's traveled and got all of these experiences. So it's not like you're behind
Hmm.
per se. It's not directly a race and like this is the milestone that you're expected to hit by this time. It's different paces, and it's not a competition.
Now, was there an expectation like that for you to go to university? Is it the same in Australia? Like, is there a heavy focus on that? Is there a heavy focus on going through college, getting a degree, and then getting into a job?
Yeah,
Okay.
not quite to the level of here where if you don't go to in Australia it's called university. University is the primary word instead of
Hmm.
college, and it's not quite as heavy of a focus on just like you got to go to college now to get a good job. And because I had a lot of I say well friends, they were friends in high school, and like I don't talk to anyone from high school anymore. So a lot of them did like choose other ways. Like they went through the trades, and they're making the last I saw of them, they were making a good living and they were happy. So power to them. But that was the norm of you go to university, you get a part-time job, either McDonald's or something a little bit more higher end, receptionist. Or I had a friend who I think he was a bellhop for a while in a hotel, and you go to class, you work your job, and then you go out to the clubs on the weekends. And that was the cycle that still a lot of friends are going through. And I was not particularly interested.
And so when it comes to you meet this guy who says, he's basically going to be like almost like a recruiter and kind of get you into a school in the States. Did you have any aspirations to get out of Brisbane? Were you like, I have to get out of here, like this place is terrible? Or because and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Australia is bad like some of these other countries where people are like literally trying to get out, like they have to get out, and so they want to come over here for college or whatever the case may be. It doesn't seem like Australia is like that. So did you have this like, oh my god, I have to get out?
I got to remember that this is just audio, and I keep shaking my head or like nodding, and no one's going to see that. It was not so much like I got to get out of here. It's more of I wanted change and I wanted to travel. So before I met a guy named Chris, who's the sports agent, I talked to a travel agent about doing like a 6-week tour through Southeast Asia in like 4 countries, and she talked to a travel agent, got it all sorted, showed it to my mum, and she said, "Hell no."
Okay.
So that got shot down. So it was always travel and wanting change. So yeah, I was born in Sydney, but I grew up like adolescent before high school in a place called Bribie Island, which is about an hour north drive of Brisbane, and then moved to Brisbane for high school. So there's always that like a little bit of change. Not like it was an unstable childhood per se, but there was a new scenery every once in a while. And I'd been in Brisbane for at that point 5 years, so I was ready to move again. And again, it's not like the university system in Australia is bad. It's just I wanted change, and then again wanted to do the 2-for-1 where I get to travel and yeah, get to still get the education done.
So when he starts talking about, okay, we can get, we can work with your times, we got cross country, was it automatically in the US?
Yeah. So Chris, he actually did go to college in America as well back in the 80s, and he went to, I believe, Oklahoma
Okay.
or Oklahoma State for tennis, and he got near a full ride because he was that good. Then he came back, and he came back to Australia after he got his degree, and he realized that, well, he did it for himself. He figured out all of the paperwork and the visas and the passports and all of that to get himself over there and stay over there, to get through college. So he's like, there's no one helping these people, and this is an opportunity.
None.
So he set up a company, and for legal purposes, he's less of a recruiter, more of the agent. So he's representing the athlete, not the colleges. So there's laws in America where basically he cannot be reimbursed or paid or employed, et cetera, anyway by the colleges. So he's paid by the athlete at the start of the process, and then he goes out and he does the legwork of building a profile for you that's very pretty. And I actually got to see it. He basically makes a small, like a 1-page website for you. And then based on his experience and his knowledge of the different universities and colleges and what their like level of scholarship and blah, 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 he then reaches out to over 50, give or take, that meet the criteria that would work with you based on your ability level and your price range. And the ones that are interested then get back to him, and he connects them with us, and then we then talk with the coaches and the colleges and see which one works.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody the other day who was student athlete and came over. No one told him that you could take the option to work less as a student athlete, but then I think it was stay longer. And so when he finished, they were like, yeah, you worked full time for the time that you were here. So like you got like, this is it. You're done. Like once you graduate, you're out.
Yeah.
Like you can't work anymore. And so he could take more classes, he could be enrolled, but he's got like 2 masters now. So it's like he doesn't need to take any more classes. I mean, he's got everything that he needs, but no one went through that education process with him. No one told him, these are your options. They were just like, oh yeah, you want to get a job, go ahead. So he worked full time
Mm.
all the way through, and now they're like, yep, that's it, you're done.
Bon voyage.
Yep.
And I call them landmines, and I think that's what Chris called them as well. Of there are a lot of things that if you step on a landmine, you're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take one misstep in this process somewhere, sometimes you can get away with it. Other times, like that can blow it all up.
We'll talk about a landmine. You have a landmine.
I've had too many landmines. I do credit Chris a lot because he was able to sort of lead me through a lot of the minefield, particularly in the early stages of the process. So like going to get the visa, I also had to go to the American consulate, which is in Sydney. So I had to fly down there with like all of the documents and do like an interview, and had to go in by myself. And there was like 30 or so other people in there as well, all for different, like probably a lot of tourist visas or work visas, blah blah blah, to America. And I remember there was one guy who was at the window, and they told him like, you don't have the right document, so we can't process it. And he just told me, he was yelling rather loudly, so he told everyone that I just came from the other side of the country, which is Perth, and like what I need is back there. And the consulate said, sorry, there's nothing I can do. But what did happen when I got there was, once it's like 3 rooms, you go through security, they don't let you have any outside clothing, so you're in the bare minimum, just like you're not going to get arrested for indecency.
Mm-hmm.
Have a folder with your documents. They don't let anyone else go up with you. So I was there with my mum, but they said, no, you got to wait outside. So then I get escorted to an elevator by a guard, pushed into the elevator where there's another guard who takes me up like a couple dozen floors, where I get handed out to another guard who takes me to the first room and go through 2 windows, and they quickly look over what I've got, send me into the next room, and sit down for a while, wait, and then get called up to the window again. And they look over it, and they just go like a little checklist, and they quickly go through it. And the lady goes, all right, so all of your documents looks good. However, our machine is down, so we can't accept these documents. Wait, what? So what you're going to have to do is head down to the post office, and you got to post all of the stuff that you need to us. And I was like, but I'm right here. It's like, so you want me to go down to the post office, which we're in the middle of Sydney, so it's like a 50-meter walk, like 2 blocks or something. And you want me to put all of this stuff into a package to then post back to you that I could like hand. And she said, yeah, that's exactly it.
Like, why can't you just take? I'm sitting right here. Why can't you just keep
Exactly.
these?
You can't
Make
just
a
put them
copy.
you can't just put them in a folder somewhere. And
Yeah.
I was like, and I was particularly nervous about that because they needed to take my passport. So now I'm going to be posting my passport, which you definitely shouldn't do. So I was like, got downstairs, and they also gave me a note that said, yes, this is what happened. And as I'm going down, I talked to the security guard a bit, and he said, yeah, it's been down for like a week. They've got a backlog of like 300 applications. And I'm like, oh my God.
Well, not only that, but I mean, as you're going up these elevators, you're being passed off from guard to guard. You're probably like, what, 17 or 18 years old at the time?
I was just turned 18, so we picked a college like a little bit before, I think a little bit after my 18th in May, and leaving so I'm actually just past like 2 weeks ago, 4 years since I first came over to America. So it was like July 29th was when we boarded the flight, 2015. So this was about 6 weeks or so before, because you also had to like book an appointment with the consulate, and you need to have the college picked already. So once we picked the college, then booked the appointment, and that was the first available one that we could get. So then did that, and then it's 6 weeks until departure day.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've got to. They told us it would take like 2 to 3 weeks, but then they said there's a backlog. So I'm just like, oh my God, like this is what's gonna happen. They're gonna like take forever. They're gonna get through the backlog, and it's gonna like arrive like a week late, like with the visa, because I got to like do like a full-on stamp in my passport,
Okay.
like not just like a real, like with my picture and everything. It looks like another passport, like your photo ID page. But yeah, went downstairs, explained it all to my mum, went down to the post office, shoved it all in a big envelope, and shipped it off to them. And I think it arrived like just over about 2 weeks before departure day. So that was crisis averted. Wish that had happened other times.
Yeah. So you pick your school. and you're coming over to the States. Your mom's coming over with you,
Yeah.
right? And you guys don't really know. You know where you're going, but you don't really know where you're going, right? You have a school picked, and you're like, all right, this is going to be great. Like, I'm going over to the States. I'm going to go to school over there. I'm going to get like this great experience. I'm going to get to see all these things. And you kind of land, and it's not really quite that way. So talk to me a little bit about the school that you picked and how it wasn't exactly what you had in mind.
So, school I picked was Indian Hills Community College, and it is in southeast Iowa, Ottumwa, town of about 30,000 people. The most notable thing about it is it's where Radar is from in MASH. Like, that's really all that I. And I knew it was a small town, and I knew it was a fairly small college. The campus itself is great. They have a lot of space and a great location, and they really do put in effort to make it look nice. But then once you get off outside of the campus, there's not a lot there. And God bless Ottumwa. Like, nothing wrong about the people that I met there. Midwest is as advertised. Some of the nicest people you'll ever meet.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not much to do, particularly when you're like an 18-year-old and bored.
Right.
So it was a lot of hanging out in the dorms and mucking around with friends. But yeah, my mom, we picked Indian Hills because like price, location. So the first college that got back to me was a community college in northeastern Michigan, like almost right on the lake. And I'm from Brisbane, so during the winter it gets to like 70 degrees still during the day, and it never snows. And I'm not the biggest fan of the cold at the best of times. So I loved everything about the college and the coach except the location. I told them like I'm not going to survive. Like,
Yeah.
I'll just be miserable. And then just I think about give or take like 30 colleges got back to Chris and then got forwarded onto me of different levels of interest. And then we had a look at them and like either and knocked them out for different reasons like price, location, didn't like the program. Some of them, the coaches, like got to one and we did a Skype call with one coach, and I swear I could hear like the Knicks game in the background or something.
Yeah, so you felt like he wasn't even paying attention.
No.
You're like, okay, well, this is
Yeah, so
wasting my time. If you're not interested in me, I'm
Yeah.
not interested in you either.
And particularly when I'm going to the other side of the world where I don't know anyone, and that was why my mother came over because she's like, I'm not sending you over to the other side of the world to like without seeing this place and knowing that you're going to be okay because you may get there and it wasn't quite as advertised, well, but it may be way worse.
Right.
Thankfully, it was fine. Like I survived, and
Yeah,
it wasn't dangerous or anything like that. And I remember a couple of times my mom like she would see something in the news about like a shooting in a college like 2 states over, and would ask me if I'm okay. I'm just like, Mom, it's 2 states away. Like I'm fine.
And so, what is the impression of America over in Brisbane?
It's a bit of a mix. So do get we do get American news and we do see a lot of that, but it's mainly like the upper end, like the real buzzworthy and the sound bites and all that. So unfortunately, it's a lot of the negative stuff because that gets the most press. So it's primarily the school shootings and well, now Trump,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I came over to America in Iowa, which is a very red state, right as he like announced he was running. So
Mhm.
I got to witness all of that and went to the Republican Iowa caucus as well. And that
Okay.
was an interesting experience as well. And not to get into politics, but just how like passionate people were about it. And like people are passionate about politics in Australia, but not to like that level in my mind of aggressiveness about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like, yeah, that to generalize an entire country's idea, it's more of like, yeah, they're all crooks to
Mhm.
some degree, or they're all just nothing will change. But I tried to just ignore it and focus on what I was doing, like in the present and what was right in front of me, which was college and running.
So, would you say it's an overall, even though there's some negatives, it's an overall like positive impression towards the States from the Australians, or they're
Overall positive, but
Okay.
then Australians are very sarcastic, and the expression is taking the piss, where we just mock everything to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Similar, like if you imagine like all the late night comedy shows, like Stephen Colbert, blah blah blah. It's always that just like mocking sort of.
Yep.
So and America is one of the countries, Australia's closest allies, but we still do. We'll mock our own prime minister, which is the equivalent of the president, like the
Mhm.
top executive. We mock him. We mock our friends, even
Mhm.
like to their face, and that's just the humor there. So we mock them, but we still appreciate it. A lot of what America does, and I do think that America doesn't quite sometimes understand their influence on the rest of the world. Like the vast majority of movies that are in Australia are American made. So we get all of like the big Hollywood movies
Mhm.
and a couple of Australian ones thrown in there as well. So we still have that massive culture of influence and like get a lot of similar, like going to the shopping center, like just down the road is Acme.
Mhm.
And about half the brands I recognize, like Chips Ahoy, Oreo. So a lot of the big ones are there. And beers.
Yeah.
So like Heineken, Corona, and like we don't have. Let's get this one out of the way. I have never seen or heard of Foster's beer before I came to America.
That's hilarious.
It's like someone asked me about it, and I'm like, "What the hell is that?" And they're like, "Oh, it's Australian for beer." I'm just like, "I've never heard of it." And it was only like a year ago that I actually got around to trying one, and it does taste like an Australian like bitter beer, but apparently it's like made in Belgium or something.
That's funny. Oh, that's funny. So you get over to your school, and even though it's not bad. It wasn't like a complete switcheroo. They put all
Mm,
these beautiful pictures online and you get there and like it's a complete shithole, but it still wasn't quite what you were expecting.
mm.
So, how long did you stay there before you were like, "Hey, I got to get out of this place. This is not for me." And did you reach back out to Chris to help you figure out like where your next place was going to be?
Yeah. So it's a lot of different points to that question. So I just got there and we arrived at the college. I think it was we did first like a little holiday with my mother and her partner, now husband Phil, and like because to get to Iowa from Australia is a hell of a trip. So the quickest way would probably be going from Brisbane, flying to LA, LA to Chicago, and then taking the train, a 6 hour train ride into Ottumwa, that was very convenient, having that train ride from Chicago right into the town, because a lot of places in Iowa you wouldn't be able to do that. So, but instead, Mom decided that well, if we're making this trip, like, and we're going to LA and California, let's make a holiday out of it. So did LA, then trained to San Francisco and did a couple days there. Then Chicago, did a couple days there with people who I'm still friends with. That Mum just mentioned to one of her coworkers in Australia that like I'm going through Chicago to like drop off my son, and one of her coworkers said, "I have these friends in Chicago. They're runners. You're gonna love them. You're gonna stay with them," and that's how that happened.
Awesome.
So then got to Iowa and loved the team, enjoyed the school, and loved the coach, and really settled into that. But it was just town of 30,000 from Brisbane, which is a city of 2 million. And not that it was just a very different change of pace for me. And again, not that it was bad, just not what I knew I was looking for. I was definitely always knew I was a little bit more of a city kid and wanted like taking the bus and having all that around and having different options for that. So it's like, okay, I'm here now. And I think it was around mid October that I decided that it was a community college, so I'm going to have to transfer anyway. But let's see how we can speed this process up. So did the math and looking at like credits and all of that. But I still wanted to do my 2 seasons of cross country at Indian Hills for the coach because he did take a chance on me with he gave me probably more scholarship than I deserved based on my times at the time because he just had a feeling like he's switched on, he's a hard worker, and I came in with times that would have put me at number 8, the 8th guy on the team, so not even like varsity, but I was consistently the 4th guy. So he made a bet. There was a little bit of a gamble on an international, and it luckily paid off. So I did have a debt per se to him. And I decided, all right, so I'll do the 2 seasons across country. And then, so now we're looking at November 2016 is when I'd move on. So, how do I move on and do the credits and make that easier? So, I decided I'd still get my associates. So, I have to do 2 years worth of college in 15 months. And then I'll transfer like mid year. So, to do 15 months, I had to take at sometimes almost double credit load because Indian Hills, rather than semesters, they had trimesters.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about 12 weeks and like from 3 months or so. So from like late August to November, November to February, February to mid-May. So to be full time as a student, you only needed to take 8 credits. And so I also decided, all right, I'll stay over the summer because then that's another semester worth of credits that I can just knock out. And did the math, and then I would be good to go in November 2016. And the breakdown of that, like of how many credits I did, was 10, 15, 12, 14, and 10. So 15 on when 8 is full time. That was brutal.
Yeah.
On top of still having, in the winter in Iowa, still having training at least 5 times a week, and sometimes running outside in snow. That was fun. And also because had to still pay for school and have food and whatnot, working part-time in the cafeteria.
So let's talk about that, because there's a very big stipulation on how much you're allowed to work when you're here on a student visa.
Mhm.
So you have to pay for school, you have to pay for some food, right?
Mhm.
And you got to pay for just like living costs. Like if you want to go out to the bar,
Yeah.
that's it's an expense. There's things that you have to pay for, but you're only allowed to work up to what, 20 hours per
20 hours
week.
per week.
So, I mean, how are you getting that done? And is there any sort of like, okay, you can only work 20 hours a week, but we're going to pay you this to kind of like,
No, there was none of that. None of that, unfortunately. So I did it a couple ways. So I finished high school in November, but then I didn't come over to America until July. So I had about 10 months, and I had just recently started a job at McDonald's and was working a little bit there, but then like I had nothing else on, so decided to, all right, let's just ramp up the hours at McDonald's, get another job at Subway. And so for most of that time I was doing between or averaging about 30, 35 to 40 at McDonald's alone, still on, and still hadn't actually signed a contract. Like I was still considered a casual worker. Like I had no guarantee of hours or anything. But just because I was always there and always available, I ended up doing like 30 like full-time work at McDonald's plus another 20 hours or so at Subway, and then running whenever I had time. So doing like between 40 and 50 hours of work a week, and coming home smelling like oil from McDonald's and stale bread from Subway every day, and not getting home. Like I do start at 6 a.m. at McDonald's and do the breakfast rush in the train, because this was in the central train station in Brisbane. So they just get killed in the
Mm-hmm.
mornings with people commuting in for the work. So I'd be there from 6 a.m. usually till about 2 or 3, depending on the shift, and then start at Subway at 4 usually and finish there at 9:30. And then take the bus home, get home around 11, fall asleep, wake up at 5 a.m. the next morning and do it again.
And this was all just to put money away, knowing that you were coming over here
Yeah.
and you were only going to be able to work those 20 hours per week. So you knew that you were going to have some money set aside.
Yeah.
But that money isn't going to last forever. I mean, you said you've been here for 4 years,
Mm.
right? So you're here for 4 years and you can only work 20 hours a week while you're here. So where does that leave you with what you made while you were doing this?
It left me living very frugally for a lot. And food primarily was an issue because I was working in a cafeteria at Indian Hills, and also then when I transferred to Goldie Beacom just down the road. And we'll get to that. So food primarily was an issue, and I did give myself a very long runway with the amount of money I saved up. It's hard to tell what the exact, like how much I actually made, because like I still had some living costs in Australia, like bus pass and blah blah blah, and had to pay things up front. But it was somewhere in the mid, like 10 to 15,000 Australian.
Okay.
So that's about, take it with the exchange rate. If it was 15, say it was about 10 and change American
Okay.
in that time. So I had a good runway with that and just kept my costs low for as long as I could. And most of that was gone actually within the first year with the school costs, because I had a scholarship, but it was partial. And they have requirements like if you lived on campus, you had to get a meal plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the meal plan was a bit overpriced, in my opinion. But So, and then it was just living frugally and unfortunately relying on friends a lot. God bless so many of those people, like Jack, guys in Iowa. So there was Antoine, Jack, Jared, Garrett, and they just saved me a lot of times. Callie, Erica, they'll probably hear this at some point and think it's hilarious that I'm mentioning them. JD, absolutely. Colin, the coach, Scott, and just helping me out a lot in those sort of situations. Because a lot of the Americans, they got the Pell Grant, and like Indian Hills wasn't expensive, but
Mhm.
when you don't get like that federal aid and then the other stuff, it was just a little bit out of my price range. Or not out of my price range, but it was a cost. So
Mhm.
they all helped me a lot get by. Absolutely. And then yeah, working the 20 hours a week. But once I was here, really, and I'd bought all the stuff that I needed, so I had a bowl and already had a laptop. So the cost itself, like living, wasn't too bad. So most of the money was going back into school.
And so you make this decision now that you're going to transfer. You're
Mhm.
going to transfer out. You gave your 2 seasons for cross country. That was kind of like your promise. And how do you land on Goldie? I mean, yes, it's a not quite as, out in the middle of nowhere, but it's still not big city. I mean,
No,
it's not Brisbane, it's not Philadelphia, it's not New York, it's not DC. I mean, still a little bit different.
absolutely. And so around, I think it was once I made the decision, contacted Chris again. And we've been keeping in contact the whole time, but then checked in again to say, all right, this is my new plan. And part of Chris's deal or the agreement with Chris was if he gets you into a community college or somewhere, or if for whatever reason you decide to transfer, he does help with that process as well. So it's not like once you're over here, you're on your own. It's bon voyage, good luck. He still then helps on the back end and just like, hey, and like, all right, so you're transferring, okay, so let's and essentially start the process again of building a profile and looking at schools. So Chris was out doing that for me, and I wasn't just sitting around. So I talked to a bunch of other colleges as well, but mostly I was looking around the Iowa area, because that was
You
where
were
I
already
knew,
there.
and
Yeah.
I could actually go visit the college this time. I looked at a couple schools in California just for the convenience and the hope that maybe I could only do one flight to get home
Hmm.
rather than two and a train ride. But it's California, so that wasn't working. And just everyone was way out of my price range. And then it was a lot of was referrals from friends. So two guys on the team who were sophomores and transferring. One went to a place in Nebraska. So I was trying to see if I could go there, and also a place in Missouri and see if that made sense. And so I was working two jobs at the Indian Hill. So there was a cafeteria in like the secondary classroom building for all the technology classes because they had like diesel, electrical tech, et cetera. And also worked in on the main campus building where they had a small coffee shop. So I was in there. And one of the people I worked with, her name was Sophie, and just talked to her about like, yeah, so because you get bored when there's nothing going on. So it's like, yeah, I'm looking to transfer already. And she said, yeah, I'm transferring after a year. I'm moving on. And she said, I'm going to this place called Goldie Beacom College in Delaware. And she said, yeah, they have cross country, so you should have a look. I add the name to my list. And then down later, I actually asked that, so how did you find this place again? And this is where the story gets kind of boring, actually, because she said, I just Googled um, American colleges on the East Coast with women's soccer, Division Two. And that's what she put in, and Goldie Beacom showed up. And she applied and got a good academic scholarship because now we had a college GPA.
Right.
So I did the same, and then in the summer, got in contact with a cross country coach who's still there, named Andy, and we had about a 90 minute to 2 hour phone conversation, and basically I laid out what I had been up to and up to that point, and we both agreed that yeah, this is what we want, and we can help each other, and also help the cross country program, which at that point had gone. He was the third coach in 3 years, and like a lot of things had sort of fallen by the wayside. So recruiting, so there was not many new people coming in, and team morale was probably at an all-time low. So we both agreed that we wanted to help bring this program back.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That so those are some of the things that you really started working on when you got here to Goldie. You took on their social media for the cross country team. You
Hmm.
really started to try and build that up. You started recruiting. You started getting into more than just the running itself. You started to get into some other kind of like administrative things for the team. And was that just purely out of passion for the sport of running and wanting to build that program back up to something that is successful?
It was a bit of, yeah, the passion and wanting to be like part of something that was successful, because cross country is individual sports. So men do 5 miles in college and women do 5K or just 3 and a bit miles. And then like the championship race is 6 kilometers for women and 10 kilometers, so 6.25 miles for men. It's an individual, so you're out there running by yourself, but it's still a team sport.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on points. So lowest score wins. Like first guy across the line gets 1 point, second place two, and so on. So you can't win by yourself. And I recognize that. And so, okay, I can't make these guys train more than they already are. And God bless them, a lot of them were trying hard, but we need to get some new people in here as well. And so it was then looking at how do we do the recruiting? And one, we just need some brand awareness and somewhere to point people to see this is what we do and this is what we're up to. And I will give credit to Andy for doing, like, we have to do a social media. But
Mm-hmm.
then I took the point with it, and for the first year did it all by myself, which was a joy. And just copying what I saw elsewhere. So doing like the little like profile stats, like hometown, favorite food, like season goal, blah blah blah,
Mm-hmm.
and doing some half-assed Photoshop. And I taught my taught myself. So you can the cross country one I is still there, all of the posts, and there's just over 300 now, if I by last count. And I can confidently say I did at least 75% of those minimum.
Okay.
And then we added in track and field, so I took on that as well. But this time I learned to have other people involved and have it organized in some way. So it's like, okay, your job is to do like one like quote post a week. Your job is to add to the story a little bit and then coordinate like that. So it's a little bit more organized and also spreading the work out a little bit more. So then there was that aspect, which we had some people who are in now who have seen the Instagram page and have come here, because not directly like, oh, I saw it on Instagram so I'm coming, but it did help with our brand and what's the word I'm looking for? Goodwill. Let's go with that.
Okay.
And we do have like a kid should be coming to Goldie Knockwood in a year or two, and he first reached out via the Instagram.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah,
And
that's awesome.
so that one, but then we also, like, anyone who's done college recruiting for running knows that if you set that up, eventually you're going to get Kenyans.
Mm-hmm.
And Kenyans, not to disrespect the country or a lot of it, because they are some of the best runners in the world, but you do get a lot of those emails that are just, give me a full ride and I will run for you, run good for you. And I got a couple of those over the social media as well. And a lot of them were like, they were real people. Some of them weren't just as advertised. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that there's like a language barrier there. So the way that it's coming across maybe isn't the way that they mean it, but it is still what they're asking. I mean, they're still saying like, "Give me a full ride and I'll come run for you." You know,
Exactly.
like, and that's not it's not what you're looking for, especially as someone who's trying to build the program and you're looking to build more of a community as well as building a great team. It's not
Correct.
just about the times. And it kind of seems like in that case, they would be coming over literally just focused on times. Like
Yeah.
that's all that it would be about for them. And then, of course, I mean, I'm sure there's other people on the team where there is that language barrier there, but with that attitude, they would be coming across as like they don't care. They don't care what you're doing. They don't care what anybody
Yeah.
else is doing. Like I'm here to run and that's just it. And that's not what you were looking to build.
Yeah. And also, we're Division 2, so the coach can't even offer them a full ride. Like, that's the rules of D2. you can only do partial. So even he couldn't offer what they wanted, period. And then there were a lot of them that they wanted to run. They didn't care about anyone else, but they wanted a lot of things taken care of that we just couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
So very much not in the sense that they didn't want to do it for themselves. They wanted to be like escorted through it all.
Right.
So like, you take care of everything and I'll run good times. And it just wasn't going to work because it is a team sport still. And if that was another thing that was a clash of coming to Goldie, of just like the team culture from Indian Hills, where it was friendly but still highly competitive. So we were training and pushing each other every day. So someone would have an off day, but you would still be pushing to keep up with the guys who were feeling good on that day. So there was that culture at Indian Hills, and then coming to Goldie Beacom, there wasn't that at all.
And so you're now down the line, and we might be fast forwarding a little bit, but you've helped build up this program. You, just like you said, you've been here for 4 years already. You did 2 years at your first school, so you're probably closing in on 2 years here. That's at least your 4-year degree.
Yeah.
Right. And now you're continuing on, and you went right into your master's program from your 4-year degree directly into your master's.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the ultimate goal for you as far as your education goes, and what you are, like your plan kind of post graduation?
Right. So everything that we've covered so far went as planned to that degree of, finish the associates in 15 months, transfer to Goldie Beacom, started the spring 2017. So then I just had 2 years to finish my bachelor's. So I got my bachelor's degree last fall, so 3.5 years. And I recognized I was going to be finishing in the mid-fall and midway through the year, about a year and a half before that. And the plan was and still is to go to law school. How I do that is still figuring it out and how I'm going to do it for myself. But law schools generally, they don't accept mid-year like starters. You have to start in the fall and no exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the advisors at Goldie Beacom and just said, all right, so I'm finishing in the fall and I can't start law school until like 8 months later. So I could go home for 8 months and work and keep training, I guess.
Because you can't stay here.
Well, I could have stayed here and like used one of the visa options. So every time you finish a new degree level, when you're on the student visa, you are able to take 1 year to work full time.
Because you only worked the 20 hours.
Correct.
Okay, so that's where that came in.
Yeah.
But if you work full time, that option is gone.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
We'll come back to the visa stuff because I don't remember it all exactly, but from what I remember, well, we'll get back to that. So I could have worked full time because I just got a degree, and I could have a 1 year visa to work, and I could have like done the 8 months from like January to August, or really, I think they said I could could have gone home, and then I was talking to my advisor, and he just like cut in, just said, actually, you could get your master's degree in that time. I said, wait, what? So at Goldie Beacom, the MBA is 12 classes. If you do the bachelor's at Goldie Beacom as well, you can have 2 of those classes also count in your undergrad and take them in your final semester of your undergrad. And then you've only got 10 classes each. So 10 classes, so I could have done 5 in the spring and 5 in the summer. And then you'd be right to go right into law school. So then that was the plan for a while. And then looking at the cost of it as well. Still working only 20 hours a week part-time. So the MBA is affordable at Goldie, but it's not that affordable. So
not
okay,
when you're working 20 hours a week. I mean,
and
there's
still,
not much that's affordable on 20 hours a week.
No, not at all. So, and then Goldie Beacom introduced track and field this past academic year. So 2018 was the first season. So I was actually meant to have just graduated, would have been the schedule, but looked at the cost and just like, all right, it's not going to work. So how do we figure this out? So we're at just past 4 years now. So you only get 4 years to compete in college sports per sport. So I'm finished cross country, and that's done, which is sad for me, but moving on. But track and field is a different sport. So I did 1 season at Indian Hills, and this past spring in 2018, I did my second one. So I still have 2 left. So did 2 classes for the MBA in the fall, did 4 in the spring, and around midway through is when I decided that okay, I'll have 6 classes left. To be full time on the MBA, you only need to take 2 classes. I was already going to be here in the summer, so changed the schedule to instead of 5 and 5 in the spring and summer, made it 4 and then 2 in the summer, 2 in the fall, and 2 in the spring. So I'd be a full time student this coming spring, and I'd be able to compete in track and field. And then it also lines up better with the schedule for going into law school.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, spreads the cost out a little bit more. And yeah, I get to compete again in track and field. So I get my last hurrah in college sports.
Well, and I think that that's what doing it for yourself is all about.
Mm.
It's all about figuring out you want to go to law school, right?
Yeah.
And there was this hurdle in the way because you have to start in the fall, and you figured out how to get around that. You're still going to start in the fall, but you're now also going to be going in with an MBA,
Right.
and you still get to compete in track and field, and you're getting to do some of these things that you enjoy while simultaneously still going on and chasing this ultimate goal and dream of going to law school.
Correct. And the the plan has changed so many different times that I can't even count. So originally it was going to be do the 2 full years at Indian Hills, then do 2 years somewhere, and then go to a law school, and or go back to Australia and do the law degree there. And then it changed to 3.5, do 15 months at Indian Hills and 2 years at Goldie, and then hang out for a while, and then start law school in the fall. And then it's add in the MBA and finish that in that 8 months. And then it changed to do the MBA over a year and a half, and then go into law school. But then that's still up in the air of whether it'll make sense to go into law school then, and whether I can afford it and figure out how to pull that off.
Well, and I think the other important thing to note there is when you are chasing a goal or you're chasing a dream or you're doing it for yourself, there are going to be times where you have to pivot, move, make a change, and your plan isn't going to work the way that you thought it was going to. Like, so you had this plan, then this is what you were going to do. And you just said it changed 3 times, but you're still getting done what you wanted to get done.
Yeah.
So a lot of people sit down and they plan this whole thing out. And then when it doesn't go the way that they planned it to go, that's when they throw their hands up and they're like, "Nah, can't. It's look, the plan didn't work. I see I didn't make a great plan." And that's not necessarily the case, because there's going to be things, there's going to be landmines that you just can't account for. And so I think that it's important to note as well that even though things change, you're staying the course and you're pivoting and kind of going with the flow as those things start to come up.
Yeah. So it's kind of like if you're sailing from point A to point B, the wind isn't always going to agree, and maybe it'll send you one way off course, but you can still then adjust and head back and get back on course. And yeah, the journey may be a little bit longer, but it's still very enjoyable for me.
Well, you're getting to spend some time in the States, right? You're getting
Yeah,
to see some cool stuff. You're getting to experience some things that you may not have otherwise had the opportunity to experience. So,
absolutely. So I got to experience the full, like I mentioned, came into in 2015 when Trump first announced. So I got to experience the full, like, because I was seeing the news pretty often because I had TVs around and I was hanging out with friends. So I got to see the full experience of watching a presidential election from the beginnings where people are announcing to the Iowa caucus,
mm-hmm.
and then watching the candidates drop off one by one, hearing their different. So I got to experience that, and I did travel as much as I could, with my schedule. So
And budget.
yeah, and budget. So traveling on a budget, I think is sometimes a lot more fun because then you got to be very creative with
Uh-huh.
some of what you do. So just list off some of the places. So Chicago, St. Louis, Michigan, most of the major cities in California, so like San Francisco, LA, and then now we're over on the East Coast, so I've done the Jersey Coast, New York, Philly, Baltimore, DC, and heading down to North Carolina soon.
Okay.
And gonna head back up to New York, hopefully, knockwood, in November, because there's an Australian hip hop group that I've loved for years, and they're playing in Brooklyn, and
Nice.
I'm just finally,
Yeah. Yeah. A little taste of home.
little taste of home, and I've never seen them live.
Okay.
And I believe it was like I saw a banner for them like out in the streets in Australia, and I was just like, yes, they're gonna play. And then I looked at the date, and it was like 2 weeks after I left for America. I'm just like, come on, that's so close. So I missed out that time, but so yeah, so I hope to get up to that. And yeah, I've been down to Florida one time. Still haven't been to the South, like anywhere like Kentucky, Louisiana, or anything like that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the next, try to figure out how to get down there for something. And also further past New York to like Boston area.
Yeah, I've never been up that far either. My cutoff is New York City. I haven't been up that far. I'm trying to get up to Vermont this year. Um,
During this
but
time of
there's
the year for me.
no, not for me. No, you didn't see it, but I have my skis in the other room. So,
Oh God.
yeah, no, I'm going when there's white stuff on the ground, hopefully. Um, but yeah, you know it's funny that, and I guess it's always the same. Like when you have it right in front of you, you don't necessarily take advantage of it as much as you should. And that's how it is for me and the country and traveling. Like there's so much of this
Mm.
country that I have not seen. And there's people who come over here and like there's probably people who have seen more of this country that don't live here, than I have seen, because it's just like you said, I mean, there's things that you got to take into account. Like it's expensive to travel. I
Yeah.
mean, it's expensive to travel, and you also have to have the time to travel. Like scheduling wise, if you've got a lot of stuff going on, if you've got work, I mean, if you only get 2 weeks off, if you get 10 days
Yeah.
off per year, and that's for sick time, vacation, doctor's appointments, whatever the case may be, that's not a lot of time to travel. I
Mm.
mean, if you want to take, a little bit of time to spend with your family during the holidays, take a day for Thanksgiving, take a couple days around Christmas, you could potentially only have 5 days left, and then
Yeah.
you want to take 1 week's vacation. That's it,
Yeah.
I will
So
say that some of the other countries do it right, and they have, they offer a lot of time for people to go and do things like that. And I mean, I think that creates a great culture as well.
absolutely. Like I was reading, I can't recall what the rules are in Australia, but I think it's pretty similar to America on like the amount of time off. But it's like a lot of the Scandinavian countries, it's like August is the relaxation month where a lot of people do just like sort of scale back to about a part-time schedule, and it's like you get the full month to sort of you're still working, but take it a little bit slower and recharge.
I think that's kind of like the unwritten rule here in the States as well. I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of people kind of like chill out in August because then, and I'm sure it's because of the way that our school year is set up as well. Like, people are getting ready to go back to school towards the end of August. I mean,
Yeah.
we're about halfway through the month now. And so things are going to start to kind of pick back up as we get close. And then it's like, I don't know. Our schedule to me has always been so wacky because it's like you have September and October. So you have this big ramp up for September and October. And then November's Thanksgiving, which some people have off a lot for, some
Yeah.
other people don't, like, because it's so, obviously always on a Thursday. So you get that Thursday. Some people have Friday, and then that leads into Saturday and Sunday. But then next thing you know, it's like, they have this, I mean, from Thanksgiving to Christmas, like you can blink and it's like here. So then you have this, a lot of people take off, that whole week from Christmas to New Year. So like then it's like, so it's like this constant like up and down. Whereas I feel like some of these other countries, like they do it right. Like you said, you go from November, basically Thanksgiving, you're done. You have off until the new year starts. And then in the new year, you kind of like start. So like that's your refreshment time,
Yeah.
which totally makes sense.
Well, Thanksgiving is only an American holiday, but generally speaking, in Australia, it's right around like a few days before Christmas, like right around the 20th, that it starts to scale back.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have there's a holiday in Australia. It's the day after Christmas called Boxing Day, and that's also a public holiday. and I don't remember why we have Boxing Day anymore. I think the joke is it was like, oh, it's where you box up all the gifts or something. It's like, I don't remember.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was boxing like that
No,
or
no.
boxing like fighting.
I for the life of me can't remember why we have Boxing Day, and I'm probably going to get scolded when someone from Australia listens to this. Like, you should know.
Yeah.
But then there's New Year's, and then it ramps up again right after that. And it depends on your profession and blah blah. So I'm working. Fast forward to now, and I'm working part time in insurance, and my boss has told me just like August is our slowest month. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're going to be closing up a little bit earlier than normal, just because there's not much really we can do.
So I want to try and kind of bring this all together. And in order to do that, I want you to kind of tell me all through your travels and getting over here to the States, trying to figure out how you're going to pay for school, trying to figure out how you're going to navigate your way through this system that you really don't know much about. And thankfully, you had the help of Chris.
Mm.
But all through this journey, what does it mean to you to be doing it for yourself?
For me, doing it for yourself is doing what you want, and it's hard to really put that into like you're trying to get a soundbite, and there's always nuance to it, and it's figuring out what you really want and then how to get there, and understand that how to get there will not be the same as what actually happens, because there's always going to be landmines of some sort. And we'll try to get one of those landmine stories in real quick, so before we run out of time here.
Yeah.
So let's do the most recent one then. So end of fall 2018, I'd picked up a job on campus as a resident assistant, and through my own fault, I lost that job, and that job was covering my housing. So essentially, they told me like a day before I was leaving for Australia that, okay, you have about a week to decide whether you're going to live on campus and pay the $3,000 to live here for the spring, or you've got to move out. And yeah, I was leaving the next day, and with girlfriend and flying back to Australia. So already done, like it was finals week, so I'd already been stressed out by all of that, and then got hit with that bomb. So then next day we're on a bus up to New York and about halfway up, I think we were somewhere on the turnpike, the Jersey Turnpike, and I realized. So a year before, I'd lost my passport in my own fault, and had to get a new one. But I still had to carry my old passport because that had the visa stamp in it. So when I was packing the night before, I packed the new passport, but I had forgotten to pack the old passport with the visa stamp. And I realized like halfway up the turnpike to New York to then fly from JFK over to LA. So I'm like, okay, you've noticed early, you're fine. So texted coach and said, hey, I've left this. Can you get it and can you post it to me? So first mistake was forgetting, and then the second mistake was not telling him to like do some sort of priority like FedEx Super, and he just did standard first class mail, international, like a week before Christmas. So getting to Australia is no problem because I had my actual passport and no one cared. Like getting to Australia, you don't need the American visa. So got home to Australia and then we get to the day and it didn't arrive on time. So I was just like, okay, maybe I can like BS my way through this and get onto the plane, and they'll just like when they get to America, they'll figure it out and they'll realize, oh, like make me sign something to like I have to produce it in 90 days or something.
Mm-hmm.
But get to the airport and they won't even let me on the plane. So all right, crap. And I'm there with the girlfriend, and this is the first time traveling internationally, and now she has to travel 2 days, like Brisbane to LA to New York, and then a bus down to Delaware by herself. So she's understandably freaking out as well. And I had a full meltdown in the lobby of the airport in front of everyone, looking fantastic. And eventually, when I came back to it, it's like talk to the attendant again, and said, all right, first off, is she going to be okay? And they said, yep, she's fine. So got her taken care of and then sent her through the gate, which I couldn't go through. And then came back to them and then said, all right, so what can I do here? And they said, well, there are some good news actually. Because the airline had a policy where if you are unable to board the flight due to, quote, document issues, you will be able to reschedule the flight free of charge. So, all right, one big stressor out of the way. Like, I'm not losing $3,500 on
Right.
these flights. And so, and a little bit I know about law, so like, I want that in writing right now. So I got that in writing, and then I held on and had like a reference code and all that because I'd been harassed by my mother enough times and heard enough lawyers say like, get it in writing every
Yeah.
time. And then once that was taken care of, and basically got them to explain that, like, all right, so once you get the passport, book the flight, and then you'll be good to go. So then called my dad, and who had just dropped me off at the airport about an hour ago, and crying, I explained what happened, and it was my own screw up. And God bless, again, my dad for being the rock that I needed at that time. Because I was, of the opinion that everything had just blown up. That I wasn't going to even go back, and that I'd get my bachelor's degree, and then I'd be stuck in Australia. So probably wasn't in the most lively of moods for the next like week or two until the passport arrived. And then it arrived, but then so another document that you have to travel on a student visa. So you got to have your passport with the visa stamp in it. But then the visa stamp that I had still said Indian Hill. So if you transfer schools, you have to get a new document that's called an F1. And sorry, not an F1. Is that I-20? That's it. And the I-20 document has to be original, and it's from the college and that you're currently enrolled in. And it's just proof that, yep, he is enrolled here, signed. So because I was about to start a new degree, I had to get a new one. And because that now I was going to be a week late, I was going to take a 1 week class, but because I was a week late, I couldn't take the class. So I had to drop the class and mean I had to start in like the actual spring. But that also meant my degree start date had changed. So that meant I had to get a new I-20 document. So this college here had to print me a new one to sign that original. And then I did pay the FedEx priority, like
Mhm.
$100 to have it sent to Australia in 2 days. And then once that arrived, then called the airline and booked the flight like 2 days later. And then I'd like to think that that would be the end of the hiccups, but no. So then got all my stuff and booked it. And originally the first flight that we booked, it was going to get us into New York in the morning, and then we could just take a bus straight down in the same day. But with the rescheduling, I had to take a plane that was landing in New York around 6 p.m. at JFK, and the last bus down to Delaware left at 7 p.m. from Port Authority. And there's no way you can get off a plane from JFK and get to Port Authority in that time. For the people who don't know New York. So, okay, no worries. Book an Airbnb. It's New York City. There's plenty of those. So booked the Airbnb, then took the flight from Brisbane to LA, and had a 2-hour layover in LA, which, for future reference for anyone doing international travel, that is not enough time for a layover on an international flight, particularly when you have to go through immigration. So I was sprinting through the airport and probably set a record, and I got very lucky that we were there early enough in the morning that there was no one at the immigration, because normally that takes about 2 hours sometimes to get through alone. But I got lucky with that and was out through there, grabbed my suitcase, had to jog with the suitcase around to the other terminal because it's LA, it's in a big U, and then get to the gate. And then when I finally get there, they say, all right, the flight's been delayed about an hour. It's 7 a.m. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to the pub. Go sit down at the bar, have a drink, and get my phone up and get on the internet and get a notification from Airbnb. My host has had a family issue. Family emergency, I think was the word he used. And he said, I'm really, really sorry. I have to cancel. Like, I've got to take care of this. I'm like, okay, can't be mad at you, but crap. and I was landing in New York that night. So now I don't have anywhere to stay in New York. So send out a bunch of requests on Airbnb and also on another app called Couchsurfing, which is like Airbnb, but it's more of like for the budget travelers who,
Mm-hmm.
rather than like paying money, you sort of share stories and whatnot and just stay on a couches. So it's more like a low end Airbnb, and sent out a bunch of requests on that. Generally speaking, last minute requests don't work on either of those. So then, all right, sent out the request, hopped on the flight, landed in New York, got on the internet again, and either no response or can't do it. So now I'm in New York at 6 p.m. in January. God damn it. Well, that's going to kill this. and it's January, so it's freezing outside, and I've got a suitcase, I've got a duffel bag, and I've got a laptop bag. So, okay. Going through my head, I was just like, all right, so what could I do? I could try to sleep somewhere. I could try to stay up all night, because it is New York. Like, they never sleep, right? And then just by happenstance, yeah, I decided, all right, I'll go to this. I went back on Couchsurfing app, and I found there was a meetup that night. So I went to there, and I walk in with a suitcase, and they all go, he's a traveler. And I go, look, great to meet you all. I need somewhere to stay tonight. Can anyone help me? And one guy said yes. And then stayed with him. Was up the next morning, left him some chocolates I had from Australia, and then took the bus, and then finally got back to Delaware. And then, yeah, thankfully that was the end of that for that one.
Well, I want to just say, Jono, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me, giving me your story, for doing it for yourself, and how you're over here and continuing on, going to hopefully law school and kind of making it work. So I do want to say thank you so much for coming and hanging out, and I look forward to definitely staying connected with you and following this journey.
Of course. And, well, you got no excuse. I'm literally half a mile down the road most of the time. So,
yeah, exactly.
great talking to you, man.
Yeah,
Keep in
thank
touch.
you.
All right. So there it is. There you have it. That is my interview with Jono. And I would like to just say thank you to Jono for getting connected with me and coming to share his story on the podcast. Because, as I have said with some of the other guests that I've had on this show, I've had a fair number of guests who are doing absolutely amazing things that may seem unattainable to some. And I've also had some guests who have more of an everyday story of chasing their dream, and it's the fact that they haven't given up in the face of adversity, and it's a very relatable story. And that is what I really enjoy about this podcast and recording these episodes. I enjoy having the ability and the opportunity to share different stories of how people are doing it for themselves. So thank you to Jono for coming on the podcast and sharing his story with us. And I hope that you enjoyed his story as well. If you enjoyed his story, please do me a favor and share this episode or any of the other episodes that you really, really enjoy from the Do It For Yourself podcast. Word of mouth is how this is going to grow, and I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. That is all that I have for you this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. It has been a pleasure to have you here, and I look forward to having you back.